This presentation explores themes of spiritual possession and folklore which may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. What if I told you that one of the most terrifying paranormal events of the 21st century began with a $28 purchase on eBay? In 2003, a man named Kevin Mannis bought a small, unassuming wooden wine cabinet from an estate sale. The seller, the granddaughter of a recently deceased Holocaust survivor, warned him. She said her grandmother always kept the box shut, always called it the Dybbuk Box, and begged him never, ever to open it. He didn't listen. He opened it. And in doing so, he may have unleashed a force that has since been blamed for terrifying nightmares, physical illness, shadowy apparitions, and a string of unexplainable horrors that followed the box from owner to owner, culminating in a Hollywood horror film. But the story of that box, as terrifying as it is just a whisper of a much older, much deeper horror. It's a modern echo of an ancient fear, because the entity supposedly trapped within it wasn't a demon or a devil in the way most of us understand them. It was something far more intimate and in many ways far more tragic. It was a Dybbuk, a dislocated soul, a human spirit so tormented by its past life that it refuses to move on, choosing instead to violently cling to the living. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a chilling exploration into the spiritual laws of a world beyond our own, and it forces us to ask a terrifying question. What happens when a promise is broken, not in this life but in the one before? And what unspeakable price must be paid to sever a spiritual bond that death itself could not break? The answer lies at the very heart of one of Jewish folklore's most frightening creations. To understand the Dybbuk, you have to erase the images of spinning heads and green vomit popularized by Western cinema. This is not a story of a random, malevolent demon seeking to corrupt an innocent soul for the sake of evil. The Dybbuk is profoundly, tragically human. The term itself comes from the Hebrew word, dak, which means to adhere or to cling. And that is precisely what it does. It is a soul without a body, a consciousness adrift in the space between worlds, that latches onto a living person like a parasite. It clings. It adheres. It takes root in their flesh, speaks with their voice, and sees through their eyes, desperately trying to finish some piece of unfinished business from its own life. This is the core of the Dybbuk's terror. Its motivation is not damnation but desperation. It could be the soul of a person who died a sudden violent death, unable to process their own end. It could be a sinner, whose earthly transgressions have left them barred from entering the afterlife, forced to wander until they can atone. Or most terrifyingly, it could be a soul bound by an oath, a vow made in life that it must see fulfilled, even if it means hijacking someone else's body to do it. The host, the living person, becomes a vessel. Their life is no longer their own. They are a passenger in their own body, forced to watch as a tormented spirit uses them to settle a score, to seek revenge, or to experience the life it was denied. The belief in this specific form of possession ignited in the 16th century, in the mystical city of Safed, in the mountains of Galilee. This was the epicenter of Kabbalah, a form of Jewish mysticism that sought to understand the hidden architecture of God and the universe. The mystics of Safed, led by the legendary Rabbi Isaac Luria, weren't just scholars. They were spiritual cartographers, mapping the journey of the soul through life, death, and reincarnation, a concept they called Gilgul Neshamat. For them, the soul was a complex, eternal energy, and sometimes that energy could go wrong. They theorized that a soul that failed to complete its purpose in one lifetime could be reincarnated to try again. But what about a soul so damaged, so weighed down by sin or trauma, that it couldn't even properly reincarnate? What happened to the spiritual outcasts, the souls that fell through the cracks of the cosmic system? That is where the Dybbuk was born. It was the answer to a horrifying spiritual question. The Dybbuk was a glitch in the system of reincarnation. A soul so broken it could not be reborn, only attached. It was a spiritual refugee, and the living were its unwilling sanctuary. For centuries, these stories were confined to small, devout communities, passed down as cautionary tales and whispered folklore. But in the early 20th century, one man would drag the Dybbuk from the shadows of the shtetl and onto the world stage. His name was S. Ansky, a writer and ethnographer who traveled through Eastern Europe collecting the stories and beliefs of the Jewish people. He became obsessed with this dark corner of their folklore. He documented a real-life exorcism and used his research to write a play that would become one of the most famous in the history of Yiddish theater. It was called the Dybbuk, or Between Two Worlds. The play tells the story of Leah, a young bride who on the day of her wedding is possessed. But she isn't possessed by a demon. She is possessed by the spirit of her one true love, Channon, a poor, brilliant student of Kabbalah who died of a broken heart when he learned she was to be married to a wealthier man. From beyond the grave, his soul returns and clings to hers, refusing to let her go. He speaks through her mouth, professing his undying love and his claim over her, a claim he believes was sanctified in a pre-life agreement between their fathers. Ansky's play was a sensation. It captured the profound tragedy of the Dybbuk. The audience wasn't just horrified, they were heartbroken. Channon was not a monster. He was a lover whose passion was so strong it defied death itself. The exorcism performed on stage wasn't a battle between good and evil, but a heartbreaking negotiation, a spiritual court case trying to persuade a tormented soul to release its grip and find peace. This is the critical difference that sets the Dybbuk apart from the possessions we see in movies like The Exorcist. In a Christian exorcism, the goal is to cast out and destroy an inhuman entity, a demon that is the embodiment of pure evil. The rite is a spiritual war. But an exorcism for a Dybbuk is more like a therapy session, a legal arbitration, and a funeral all rolled into one. The rabbis who perform the ritual don't seek to destroy the spirit. They seek to understand it. They ask it questions. Who are you? Why are you here? What unfinished business binds you to this world? The goal is to heal the spirit, to convince it that its time on earth is over, to help it atone for its sins, and to guide it toward its final rest. They reason with it, they pray for it, and only as a last resort do they use the holy names of God to forcibly evict it. Because to the Kabbalists, every soul, even a tormented, possessing one, is a sacred creation of God that deserves compassion. The horror of the Dybbuk is not that it is evil, but that it is a reflection of our own potential for unresolved grief, for undying love, and for a desperation so powerful it can shatter the very boundary between life and death. So we have the modern legend of a haunted box sold on the internet, and the century-old story of a bride possessed by her lost love. But these are just the manifestations of the belief. They don't explain the cause. How does a soul actually become a Dybbuk in the first place? The answer is not found in random acts of evil, but in a spiritual legal system that holds the dead accountable for the promises they made while they were alive, and the terrifying consequences when those sacred vows are broken. To understand this cosmic court of justice, we have to travel back in time, to the small, devout Jewish villages, the shtetls of Eastern Europe. Picture two young men, inseparable friends named Sender and Nissen. They are scholars filled with hope and faith, their lives stretching out before them. In a moment of profound connection, they make a pact, a holy vow sworn not just to each other, but in the eyes of God. If one has a son and the other a daughter, those children will be married. Their families will be joined forever. It's a promise sealed by the highest authority, an unbreakable bond meant to echo through generations. But the world has other plans. Tragedy strikes, and Nissen dies suddenly, long before his son is born. Sender, left behind, eventually finds great worldly success. He becomes a wealthy, respected man in his community, and over the years the memory of his friend, and the sacred vow they made, begins to fade. It's not that he's a malicious man, but life, with its endless concerns of business and status, has a way of burying the past. His daughter Leah grows into a beautiful, gentle young woman, and Sender, wanting only the best for her, seeks a suitable match. A match not based on an old promise to a dead friend, but on wealth, on status, on securing his family's future. The vow is forgotten, but the heavens do not forget. Miles away, a boy grows into a man. This is Conan, the son of the deceased Nissen. He is an orphan, impoverished and alone, but he possesses a brilliant, restless mind. He dedicates himself to his studies, becoming a top student at a religious academy. But simple study isn't enough for him. He is drawn to the fringes, to the deep esoteric mysteries of Kabbalah, the secret, mystical heart of Judaism. He doesn't just want to know about God. He wants to understand the hidden mechanics of the universe, the secret names of angels, the pathways between the physical and spiritual worlds. This is a dangerous path. Kabbalah is a fire that can illuminate, but it can also burn the unworthy. Conan, driven by a desperate hunger for meaning and a sense of a destiny he can't quite grasp, pushes deeper and deeper into these forbidden practices. An unseen force, the lingering power of that broken vow, pulls him across the country. He arrives, a penniless scholar, in the very town where Sender and his daughter Leah live, and then he sees her. From the moment Conan lays eyes on Leah, he is consumed. It's a love that transcends mere attraction. It feels ancient, preordained. He recognizes in her a missing piece of his own soul, though he has no idea why. He doesn't know about the promise made between their fathers before they were even born. All he knows is that he cannot live without her. He watches her from afar, his love growing into a feverish obsession. He learns that she is the daughter of the wealthiest man in town, a man who would never consider a poor, unknown scholar like him as a suitor. Desperate, Conan abandons his conventional studies entirely. He throws himself into the most dangerous ascetic practices and mystical rites. He fasts for days, he performs ritual purifications, he scours ancient texts for spells and incantations that might force destiny's hand. He is trying to use the awesome power of the divine to bend reality to his will, to win the love that he feels is his by right. He believes their souls were twinned in heaven, destined for each other, and that her father's earthly ambitions are a perversion of a sacred cosmic plan. He is no longer just a lover. He is a spiritual warrior fighting for what he believes is cosmic justice. He seeks out the secrets of the Book of Creation, an ancient and powerful mystical text. He learns of techniques to manipulate the higher worlds, to create a golem, to commune with angels. But in his desperation, he also learns of darker things. He learns how a soul, through sheer force of will and forbidden knowledge, can refuse to move on, how it can cling to the world of the living, driven by an unfulfilled purpose, a love unrequited, or a vow left broken. He is treading on the precipice of madness, fueled by love and a burning sense of injustice. Then comes the news that shatters his world. Sender, completely oblivious to the spiritual drama unfolding around him, announces Leah's engagement. The groom is exactly what you'd expect. The son of another wealthy man. A perfect match in the eyes of the world, a devastating betrayal in the eyes of Conan. To him, this isn't just a wedding announcement. It is the final unforgivable breaking of the sacred vow. It is a desecration. The news reaches Conan as he is deep in one of his mystical rituals. The shock, the grief, the absolute spiritual despair is too much for his emaciated body to handle. He clutches a sacred text to his chest, cries out her name, and his heart gives out. He dies right there on the floor of the synagogue. His soul, supercharged with mystical energy, burning with unfulfilled love and a righteous fury, is now untethered from his body. It is a ghost, but not a normal ghost. It is a soul with a mission, a claimant in a spiritual lawsuit, and it has no intention of leaving. It has a debt to collect. The town mourns the brilliant young scholar who died so tragically, but they soon move on. The wedding day arrives. The ceremony is set to take place in a graveyard, an old tradition meant to honor the dead and remind the living of their mortality. Leah, the beautiful bride, is brought to the gravesite to pay her respects. As she stands among the tombstones, she seems to be overcome with a strange melancholy, a deep, possessive sadness. She begins to dance, a wild, mournful dance with the spirits of the dead. Her family is concerned, but they brush it off as pre-wedding jitters, the overwhelming emotion of the day. They lead her to the wedding canopy, the chuppah. Her wealthy groom is waiting. The rabbi begins the ceremony. The final blessings are about to be said. This is the moment that will seal the broken promise forever, sanctifying the union that should never have been. And just as the groom is about to place the ring on her finger, Leah shoves him back with unnatural strength. Her body goes rigid, her face contorts, and from her lips, a voice emerges that is not her own. It is deep, masculine, and filled with an otherworldly agony. It screams, "You are not my bride. I have been promised this woman. She is my destined one." The spirit of Conan, the wronged scholar, the abandoned lover, has crossed the ultimate boundary. He has broken through the veil between the living and the dead to claim what he believes is his. The Dybbuk has taken possession of the bride. The silence of the holy synagogue shatters into 1,000 pieces. A sound rips through the air, a sound that does not belong. It is not the cry of a startled bride. It is a man's voice, deep and resonant with agony, tearing its way out of Leah's throat. Her body, once poised with bridal grace, convulses. Her eyes, moments before filled with love and hope for her new husband, are now wide with a terror that isn't her own. They are windows into another soul, a soul burning with rage and despair. The wedding guests freeze, a tableau of horror. The celebratory music dies in the throats of the klezmer musicians. A glass dropped from a nerveless hand smashes on the stone floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden dreadful quiet. Leah's new husband, Minashi, takes a step back, his face a mask of disbelief and fear. This is not his bride. This is a stranger, a monster wearing her face. Sender, Leah's father, rushes forward. He sees his daughter, his only child, writhing on the ground, her beautiful white gown twisting in the dust. Leah, what is it? What's wrong with you? He cries, his voice choked with panic. But it is not Leah who answers. The voice that comes from her lips is a guttural roar of pain. You cannot have her. She is mine. Promise to me. The crowd gasps. They recognize the voice. It's an echo, a memory made flesh. It is the voice of Kanan, the brilliant, impoverished scholar who had died so suddenly. The same young man who had loved Leah from afar, who had looked at her with an intensity that bordered on madness. Sender's blood runs cold. A forgotten memory, a sin buried by years of prosperity, rises up to choke him. Promise. A sacred vow made with his dearest friend, Nissen, Kanan's father, long before either of their children were born. They had sworn that if one had a son and the other a daughter, the two would be married. A promise made and then broken, cast aside for a wealthier match, for a more advantageous union for his daughter. He had told himself it was for the best. He had told himself Nissen would have understood. But now the ghost of that broken promise was here, wearing his daughter's body like a suit of clothes. Panic erupts. People scramble away, tripping over one another in their haste to escape the unholy spectacle. Some whisper prayers, their fingers fumbling for holy symbols. Others simply scream. This is beyond their understanding. This is a nightmare invading the sanctity of a wedding. A demon at the feast. Through the chaos, a path is cleared for one man. Rabbi Azriel, the venerable leader of the community, approaches. His face is grim, his eyes, usually twinkling with wisdom, are now sharp and focused. He has seen much in his long life, but this is a darkness from the old stories, a terror from the pages of the Kabbalah made real. He kneels beside the thrashing form of the young bride, ignoring the pleas of her father to be careful. He looks directly into her eyes, or rather, into the eyes of the spirit peering out from behind them. In the name of the God of Israel, the rabbi's voice is not loud, but it cuts through the noise, filled with an authority that commands attention. Who are you that has invaded the body of this innocent daughter of Israel? For a moment the body stills. Leah's head turns, a slow, unnatural movement. A bitter, sarcastic laugh escapes her lips, a sound of pure anguish. You know who I am, Rabbi, the male voice says, dripping with contempt. I am the one who was wronged. I am the one whose soul was promised a companion, only to have it torn away by greed. I have come to claim my destined bride. Rabbi Azriel's face sets like stone. He knows what he is dealing with. This is not a simple mischievous spirit, a poltergeist. This is a Dybbuk. The word itself comes from the Hebrew Dybbuk, which means to cling or to adhere. And that is what a Dybbuk does. It is a dislocated soul, a spirit of a dead person that, instead of moving on to the next stage of its journey, latches onto a living being. It clings. A Dybbuk is not a demon in the classic sense. It is not a being of pure primordial evil. It is something almost more tragic and in some ways more terrifying. It is human. It is a soul with unfinished business, a soul so consumed by a singular passion, a burning injustice, or a desperate desire from its life that it cannot rest. It wanders the earth, a ghost without a home, until it finds a vessel, a living person to inhabit. And it's not a gentle cohabitation. It is a violation, a spiritual invasion that twists the host's body and silences their mind. Often, the vessel is a person who has committed some sin, leaving a spiritual crack in their defenses for the spirit to slip through. Or sometimes, tragically, the host is simply an innocent, a pure soul whose very light attracts the desperate, clinging darkness. Leah, on the precipice of her own sacred union, pure and full of life, was a perfect target. Her own spiritual energy, her life force, became a beacon for Kanan's desperate, wandering soul. The rabbi looks at Sender, whose face is now ashen with guilt. You made a vow, the rabbi states, his voice heavy with condemnation. Sender can only nod, tears streaming down his face. With his father before they were born. I forgot. I chose a better life for her. A better life? The Dybbuk sneers through Leah's mouth. You call this a better life? To be bound to a man she does not love, while her soulmate was left to die of a broken heart. I studied the hidden texts, Rabbi. I fasted and prayed. I even dabbled in the forbidden arts, all to be worthy of her. And for what? To be cast aside for a bag of gold. The spirit of Conan reveals the depths of its obsession. This wasn't just a youthful crush. He had used Kabbalistic formulas, mystical incantations, in an attempt to win Leah's love, to mystically bind her to him. In doing so, he had flirted with powers beyond his control. His death, brought on by extreme asceticism and a grief-stricken heart, had not ended his quest. It had merely changed its nature. His soul, already entangled in these dark arts and now cut loose from its mortal anchor, became a vessel of pure, focused will. He would not be denied in death what he was refused in life. Rabbi Azriel understands the terrible gravity of the situation. This is no ordinary possession. The spirit is powerful, intelligent, and fueled by the potent combination of righteous indignation and forbidden knowledge. A simple blessing will not dislodge it. An appeal to reason will be met with scorn. The Dybbuk is clinging to Leah with the supernatural strength of a broken oath. It has a claim, a twisted, perverse claim, but a claim nonetheless. He rises to his feet, his gaze sweeping over the terrified onlookers. His voice rings with ancient authority. This is a Dybbuk of formidable power, he announces. It believes it has a right to be here. A sacred promise was broken, and this spirit has come to seek its own justice. He turns back to the possessed bride, who is now watching him with a cunning, malevolent intelligence. But you have transgressed, the rabbi declares, pointing a finger at her. You have crossed the boundary between worlds. You have taken a holy vessel, the body of a human being, for your own. This is forbidden. You have no right. The Dybbuk just laughs, a chilling, hollow sound. Right is what you take. She is mine. The rabbi knows what must be done. This is now a legal matter, a spiritual litigation. The soul of Conan must be formally tried. It cannot be simply banished, it must be judged. He must convene a beit din, a rabbinical court, to hear the case. But you cannot put a ghost in the witness box. You must summon it, compel it, and hold the trial right here in this world, with the possessed woman as the agonized centerpiece. It is a dangerous, terrifying prospect, an exorcism that is also a court case, where the judges, the plaintiff, and the defendant are all playing for the highest possible stakes. The immortal soul of Leah. Rabbi Azriel looks at Sender, then at the terrified groom, and finally at the entire congregation. We cannot expel this spirit by force alone, he says, his voice a low, grim pronouncement. We must summon it to judgment. We will hold a trial. A trial. The words hang in the air, heavier than the incense, colder than the stone walls of the synagogue. A murmur ripples through the wedding guests, a wave of confusion, fear, and morbid fascination. A trial? For a ghost? How do you put a shadow in the witness box? How do you serve a summons to a soul that has no body? This isn't an exorcism as we might imagine it. No chanting priests and holy water. This is something else entirely. Something older, more intricate. This is a legal proceeding. A rabbinic court, a beit din, is being convened not just to cast out a demon, but to sit in judgment of a lost soul. To understand the gravity of this moment, you have to understand the Jewish view of the soul and the law. In this tradition, law isn't just for the living. It's a cosmic principle, an extension of divine order that governs all of creation, seen and unseen. A Dybbuk isn't just a malevolent force. It is the spirit of a human being who has died. A sinner, yes. A transgressor, absolutely. But still a soul. And a soul, even a damned one, has a story. It has a grievance. The rabbis believe that a spirit clings to the living world for a reason. It is tethered by an unresolved injustice, a broken promise, a debt that was never paid. To simply tear it away from its host by force, without hearing its case, would be an act of spiritual violence. It would be an injustice in itself. So Rabbi Azriel isn't just an exorcist. He is a judge. He is about to preside over a tribunal for the unquiet dead. He intends to use the full weight of sacred law not to destroy the spirit, but to compel it, to reason with it, and ultimately, to grant it peace so that it will depart on its own accord. It's a breathtakingly sophisticated approach to the supernatural. A legal battle for a woman's soul. The synagogue is cleared of all but the essential participants. The wedding canopy, a symbol of joy and union, is taken down. In its place, a stark and solemn courtroom is assembled. Rabbi Azriel, along with 2 other respected rabbis, will form the panel of 3 judges, the minimum required for a beit din. They don white robes, the color of purity and also of shrouds, signifying that they are dealing with matters of life and death, and what lies beyond. Leah is brought to the center of the room. She is a ghost in her own wedding dress, her eyes vacant, her body a puppet for the entity within. The groom, her intended, watches from a distance, his face a mask of helpless anguish. Her father, Sender, stands pale and rigid, his hands clenched into fists. He knows somehow that this is about him. Then the final preparations begin. A circle is drawn on the floor around Leah, not with chalk, but with holy incantations whispered under the breath of the rabbis. This is not a cage, but a boundary, a sacred space separating the world of the living from the world of the tormented spirit. Inside the circle is Leah, the vessel. Outside, the court of holy law. 7 Torah scrolls, the physical embodiment of the sacred law, are taken from the holy ark. They are held by 7 elders of the community, who stand around the circle, forming a second, human wall of divine authority. Their presence transforms the synagogue from a house of prayer into a courtroom of ultimate appeal. 2 men are positioned at the ready, holding shofars, the ancient ram's horns used to call the community to repentance and war. Their blasts are set to shatter the barriers between worlds, to be a sound that even the deafest soul can hear. The air grows thick, electric with anticipation. The only light comes from flickering candles, casting long dancing shadows that seem to have a life of their own. Rabbi Azriel steps forward, his face grim, his eyes fixed on the possessed girl. He is no longer just a small-town rabbi. He is an arbiter between heaven and earth. He raises his hand, and a profound silence falls over the room. It is the silence of a held breath, the silence before a storm. In the name of the holy court of this community, he begins, his voice resonating with an ancient power, and with the authority of the sacred Torahs that stand witness here, we summon the spirit that has invaded the body of this maiden, Leah, daughter of Basia. We summon you to judgment. Leah's head snaps up. Her eyes, which were glazed and empty, now burn with an intelligent, malevolent fire. A sneer twists her lips. It is not her sneer. The voice that comes out is not her voice. It is a man's voice, rough and filled with gravel and centuries of bitterness. I will not answer to you. Rabbi Azriel is unmoved. He is prepared for this defiance. You have no choice, he states, his tone flat and absolute. You have trespassed into the domain of the living. You have seized a body that is not yours. By the laws of God and man, you are subject to this court. You will answer. The Dybbuk laughs, a horrible, grating sound that echoes in the silent synagogue. Your laws mean nothing to me. I am beyond your reach. This is the critical moment, the first test of the court's authority. Rabbi Azriel glances at the men with the shofars. He gives a short, sharp nod. The men raise the curved horns to their lips and unleash a single shattering blast. The tikia, a pure, piercing, unbroken note that seems to rip through the very fabric of reality. The sound is physical. It vibrates in the chest, in the bones. The candle flames dance wildly. Leah's body convulses as if struck by lightning, and she lets out a pained shriek. When the echo of the shofar fades, the sneer is gone from her face. In its place is a look of shock and for the first time a flicker of fear. The Dybbuk has been shaken. It has felt the power arrayed against it. Rabbi Azriel presses his advantage. Again we command you, by the power of the Almighty, state your name and your purpose here. Why do you torment this innocent soul? There is a long tense silence. The entity inside Leah seems to be wrestling with itself. The girl's body trembles, caught in the spiritual tug of war. Finally, the male voice speaks again, but this time it is different. The defiance is still there, but it is laced with a deep, consuming sorrow. A pain so profound it feels ancient. My name. The voice rasps, each word a struggle. My name is Hanan. A gasp goes through the room. Sender, Leah's father, stumbles back as if he's been physically struck. His face goes as white as the rabbi's robes. He knows that name. Rabbi Azriel's eyes narrow, focusing on Cinder for a brief moment before turning back to the possessed girl. He senses he is on the verge of the truth. Hanan, he repeats, his voice now softer, like a lawyer coaxing a confession from a reluctant witness. And why, Hanan, have you come back from the world of truth to this world of lies? What claim do you have on this woman? The spirit of Hanan, speaking through Leah, slowly turns its head. It ignores the rabbis, the Torahs, the holy circle. It fixes its burning gaze directly on one man, on Cinder. And when it speaks, its voice is no longer just a rasp. It is a raw, agonizing cry of betrayal that cuts through the silence like a shard of glass. He is the reason, the Dybbuk bellows, Leah's small finger pointing, trembling with rage. Her father. He made a promise to me, a sacred vow, and he broke it. The words hang in the air, heavy and cold as iron. Every eye in the synagogue turns to Cinder, Leah's father. A successful merchant, a pillar of the community, now frozen in place, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. The congregation murmurs, a wave of confusion and fear. A broken vow? A sacred promise to a ghost? Cinder stammers, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? A sound escapes Leah's lips, but it's not her voice. It's a laugh, a bitter, hollow sound filled with years of pain. You don't know me? You don't remember Channon? Your friend? Your brother in study? The one you cast aside like a worn-out coat? The name Channon hits the room like a thunderclap. The older men shift uncomfortably. They remember. They remember a young man, brilliant, intense, with eyes that burned with a fire for the divine. A student of the mystical, the Kabbalah, who spent more time communing with angels in ancient texts than with men in the marketplace. And they remember he was always with Cinder. In their youth, Cinder and Channon were inseparable. Two souls entwined, poring over the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, debating the nature of creation until the candles burned down to puddles of wax. They weren't just friends, they were study partners, a shavruta, a bond considered as sacred as family. The Dybbuk's voice softens, dripping with a venomous nostalgia. We sat under the stars, Cinder. We shared our bread and our dreams. We were poor, yes, but we were rich in spirit. And we made a pact, a covenant sworn not just between us, but before the throne of glory itself. The story spills out of Leah, the words not her own, painting a picture from a time before she was born. It's a story of two young men, full of hope and piety. They were about to go their separate ways, Cinder to apprentice with a merchant, Channon to a distant yeshiva to deepen his mystical studies. Fearing the world would pull them apart, they made a solemn oath. If God blessed one with a son and the other with a daughter, their children would be joined in marriage, uniting their families and their souls for eternity. It was a promise born of youthful idealism, a spiritual chain to bind their futures together. I upheld my end of the bargain, the voice rasps, a sound of grinding stones. I loved her before she was even born. I dedicated my studies to her. I sought to purify my soul to be worthy of her. Every secret I uncovered in the holy texts, every prayer I uttered, was to build a sacred home for our life together. While Cinder was building a material fortune, Channon was building a spiritual one. He delved deeper and deeper into the forbidden arts, the practical Kabbalah. He learned the secret names of angels, the incantations to ward off evil, the combinations of letters that could, it was whispered, bend the fabric of reality. He wasn't doing it for power. He was doing it for love. He believed that by mastering these celestial secrets, he could create a perfect life for Leah. A life shielded from all sorrow. A life touched by divine grace. But his devotion became an obsession. He fasted for days, his body growing thin and frail, but his spirit, he believed, grew stronger. He saw visions in his waking hours and wrestled with dark forces in his sleep. To the outside world, he was becoming a strange, withdrawn recluse. But in his mind, he was a spiritual warrior preparing for his destiny. Meanwhile, Cinder's life took a different path. Wealth changed him. The concerns of heaven were replaced by the concerns of the ledger book. The memory of his old friend and their youthful vow grew faint, like a dream upon waking. When his daughter Leah came of age, he saw her not as the fulfillment of a sacred pact, but as an asset. A beautiful, intelligent daughter to be married off to a wealthy family, to consolidate his power and secure his legacy. The Dybbuk's voice cracks with agony. the sound of a soul being torn in two. And then I heard the news. Whispers on the wind that traveled from your prosperous town to my humble study. You had arranged a match for her. Not with me, but with the son of another rich man. A boy of wealth and lineage, but with a soul of dust. The betrayal was more than Channon could bear. It wasn't just a broken promise between friends. To him it was a sacrilege. Sender had taken something holy, their vow, his love, his entire life's purpose, and desecrated it on the altar of greed. In his despair, Channon resolved to do the unthinkable. He decided to force God's hand. He believed there was a ritual, a dangerous and forbidden combination of divine names and fasting, that could give him the power to change his fate. It was a spiritual gamble of the highest order. If he succeeded, he would gain the influence to reclaim his promised bride. If he failed, the price was annihilation. I locked myself away. The Dybbuk confesses, Leah's body trembling with the memory. I drew the circle of salt. I recited the names that should not be spoken. I called on powers that mortal man was never meant to command. I felt the world itself begin to unravel around me. I reached for heaven, but my heart was filled with despair. And in that moment of weakness, it broke me. My soul was torn from my body with the vow still clinging to it, unfulfilled. He died, not from sickness or old age, but from a spiritual cataclysm of his own making. His soul ripped from its vessel by forces he could not control. And because of the broken promise, because his entire existence was tied to this earthly destiny with Leah, his spirit could not move on. It could not find the world to come. It was trapped anchorless, a ghost wandering the fringes of the world, consumed by a single burning purpose, to claim what was promised to him, to find his bride. The synagogue is utterly silent. The story is finished. It's no longer just the ranting of a demon. It is a testimony, a plea from a wronged soul. Channon the Dybbuk is not just a monster terrorizing a young girl. He is a plaintiff demanding justice. He is here to collect on a debt, a spiritual debt that Cinder let go unpaid. He possesses Leah not to destroy her, but to be with her. In his twisted, broken view, this is the only way to fulfill the vow. If he cannot be joined with her in life, he will be joined with her in spirit. Their souls fuse together in this terrifying, unholy matrimony. Rabbi Azriel's face is pale. He had prepared for a battle with a mindless evil, a simple exorcism to cleanse a corrupted soul. But this is something else entirely. This is a legal dispute, with divine law at its center. A vow made before God is a binding contract. To simply cast Channon's spirit out without addressing the legitimacy of his claim would be a grave injustice in itself, could be a sin. The rabbi looks from the tormented face of Leah, now weeping silent tears, to her father, who has collapsed onto a bench, broken and ashamed. He then looks at the Holy Ark, where the Torah scrolls reside, the very source of divine law. His voice, when he finally speaks, is heavy with the weight of this impossible situation. This is not a matter for a simple exorcism, he declares, his words echoing in the stunned silence. This is a matter for a court of law. He turns to the elders, his eyes grave. We must convene a beit din, a rabbinical court. We will put the dead on trial. The words hang in the air, heavier than stone, more chilling than the grave. A trial for the dead. It was a concept so alien, so radical, that for a moment, the only sound was the frantic beating of hearts in a crowded room. This wasn't about holy water and chanted prayers anymore. This was about jurisprudence, about justice for a soul that had no body, and a verdict to be rendered on a defendant who was already a ghost. A beit din, a rabbinical court, is one of the oldest legal institutions in the world. For thousands of years, it has adjudicated matters of Jewish law, from business disputes to divorces, from questions of ritual purity to matters of community governance. It is a court of sages, of scholars who have dedicated their lives to the intricate labyrinth of the Talmud. But its jurisdiction had always been confined to the living. What Rabbi Azriel of Miropol proposed was to stretch the boundaries of law, of reality itself, to convene a court whose authority reached beyond the veil of death. The elders exchanged panicked glances. To some, it was madness, a blasphemous overreach of mortal authority. Who were they to judge a soul that had already faced the judgment of the Almighty? To others, it was a stroke of genius, an act of profound faith and courage. An exorcism was a battle of wills, a spiritual arm-wrestling match. But a trial was an appeal to a higher order. It wasn't about brute force, it was about cosmic justice. It was an assertion that even in the chaos of demonic possession, the sacred principles of law and order must prevail. Rabbi Azriel's will was iron. He saw the doubt in their eyes, but his conviction did not waver. The Dybbuk, he argued, was not merely a random malevolent force. It was a soul with a grievance. A soul that believed it had been wronged. And as long as that grievance went unaddressed, it would cling to Leah, using her life force to scream its silent rage into the world. To simply cast it out would be to ignore the root of the problem. It would be like treating a symptom while letting the disease fester. No, the wound had to be cleansed. The injustice, real or imagined, had to be heard. Preparations began immediately, cloaked in an atmosphere of solemn urgency and profound dread. The great synagogue of Meropol was to be transformed from a house of prayer into a house of judgment. 3 of the most respected rabbis in the region were chosen to sit as judges or dayanim. Rabbi Azriel himself would not preside. He would act as the advocate, the prosecutor for the living, for Leah. The head of the court was to be the venerable Rabbi Mordecai, a man so old and so steeped in mystical lore that it was said he could read the secret names of angels in the flickering of a candle flame. The community was instructed to fast and pray. A palpable fear mixed with a strange electric excitement spread through the shtetl. This was an event unheard of in generations. Black curtains were hung over the windows of the synagogue, shutting out the world. 10 of the most righteous men in the community were chosen to form a minyan, a prayer quorum, whose constant recitation of psalms would form a spiritual wall of protection around the proceedings. Inside, a simple wooden table was set up at the front of the sanctuary, before the holy ark containing the Torah scrolls. 3 chairs were placed behind it for the judges. A single, straight-back chair was placed before them. This was the defendant's chair, and the witness stand, and the victim's seat. It was for Leah. But how do you serve a summons to a spirit? How do you compel a ghost to appear in court? This too was a matter of ancient esoteric ritual. On the morning of the trial, 2 messengers were dispatched to the Jewish cemetery on the edge of town. They carried with them a shofar, a ram's horn, and a formal hand-scribed summons, written in Aramaic, the language of the Talmud and the spirit world. They stood before the grave of the man the Dybbuk claimed to be, Nisan ben Rivka. The summons was read aloud, its words rolling over the weathered tombstones. It was a formal declaration commanding the spirit of Nisan, by the authority of the Holy Court of Meropol and in the name of the God of Israel, to appear before the Beit Din to answer for its transgressions against the living. It was commanded to present its case, to state its grievances, and to submit to the judgment of the court. Then the shofar was sounded, a long piercing primeval blast that tore through the morning quiet. It was a sound of alarm, of coronation, of revelation. It was the sound that was said to have toppled the walls of Jericho, the sound that will one day announce the coming of the Messiah. On this day it was a subpoena, echoing not just through the air, but through the unseen world that lies just beside our own. Back in the synagogue, Leah was brought in. She was pale, her eyes wide with a terror that seemed to belong to her, and a cunning that did not. As she was led to the chair, the spirit within her began to stir. A low growl rumbled in her chest. "Fools!" The voice that came from her lips was Nisan's, a gravelly bitter sound that was a grotesque mockery of Leah's own. "You think your little court can command me? You think your paper scrolls and your sheep's horn hold any power over one who has seen the other side?" The voice laughed, a dry, rasping sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "I have stood before the throne of judgment. Your mortal authority is a joke. A child's game." Rabbi Azriel stepped forward, his face a mask of calm authority. "You were summoned according to the law of Moses and Israel," he said, his voice steady and clear. "And by that law you are bound. You claim an injustice was done to you in life. This court offers you the one thing you have been denied: a hearing. State your case or be forever condemned as a malicious liar, a rogue spirit worthy of no sympathy, fit only to be cast into the abyss." The Dybbuk fell silent. For the first time it seemed uncertain. The offer was a trap, but it was also a lure. For a soul defined by its grievance, the chance to finally voice that grievance before a court of law, to have its story heard and recorded, was an irresistible temptation. The spirit's pride, its burning need for vindication, warred with its contempt for these mortal proceedings. The 3 judges, robed in black, entered in solemn procession and took their seats. Rabbi Mordecai, the head of the court, sat in the center. His long white beard rested on his chest, and his eyes, though ancient, were as sharp as a hawk's. He looked at Leah, but he spoke to the entity inside her. The synagogue was packed. The air was thick with the scent of old books, melting wax, and raw fear. Every eye was fixed on the small, trembling figure in the chair. Leah, the bride-to-be, was now the center of a supernatural legal drama, her body the vessel for a defendant from beyond the grave. Rabbi Mordecai raised a hand, calling for silence. The low murmur of whispered prayers ceased. The world seemed to hold its breath. He leaned forward, his gaze locked on Leah, on Nisan. His voice, though quiet, filled the cavernous space with an undeniable power, the weight of centuries of law and tradition behind it. "We are convened as a Beit Din, a court of justice in the name of heaven," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "Spirit, who calls himself Nisan ben Rivka, you have trespassed into the domain of the living. You have seized the body of this innocent daughter of Israel. By what right do you commit this crime? By what right do you haunt this world? Speak your name and state your claim." A silence fell upon the room, thick and heavy, a silence that seemed to absorb all sound, all light, all hope. And then from Leah's throat, a voice tore through the quiet. But it was not her voice. It was a sound that didn't belong in the world of the living. A voice layered with the dust of the grave, and the echoes of a world unseen. It was a man's voice, rough with sorrow and ancient rage. "You ask by what right?" the voice rasped, Leah's lips moving in a grotesque parody of speech. "You who sit in judgment, cloaked in the authority of laws that govern the living. You know nothing of the laws that bind the dead. You know nothing of promises broken, of justice denied." The rabbi stood his ground, his face a mask of grim resolve. "The law is the law for the living and the dead. A soul has its place, and this world is not yours. Speak your claim or be cast out by the holiest of names." A sound half-laugh, half-sob escaped Leah's lips. "My claim is written in the heavens. It was sealed on earth between two friends, two boys who became men, who swore an oath under the same moon that now looks down upon this travesty." The voice of Nisan ben Rivka, speaking through the vessel of the young woman he possessed, began to weave a story. It was a tale that began not in the shadows of a graveyard, but in the sunlit fields of their youth. "His name was Sender," the Dybbuk lamented. "Sender ben Henya, the man you know as this girl's father. We were like brothers. We shared every crust of bread, every secret dream. We studied Torah together, our minds and hearts entwined. And as young men on the cusp of our lives we made a pact, a sacred covenant. We swore that if the heavens blessed one of us with a son, and the other with a daughter, our children would be joined in marriage. Our families would become one, our friendship sealed for all eternity. It was an oath made in the purity of youth, an oath witnessed by God himself." The voice trembled with a grief that spanned decades. "I was the first to be blessed. My wife Rivka gave me a son. We named him Hanan, a light in our lives. But my time on this earth was short. A plague swept through our village, and I was taken before I could see my boy speak his first words, before I could teach him the alphabet. As I lay dying, my only comfort was the oath. My friend Sender would care for my legacy. He would honor the pact. My son Hanan would have a bride. My lineage would continue." The Dybbuk's tone hardened, the sorrow curdling into a bitter accusation. "I crossed over into the world of truth and I waited. I watched as Sender's fortunes grew. He became a wealthy man, a respected man. And he was blessed with a daughter. This daughter, Leah, the very girl who was destined for my son. But wealth is a poison to memory. It corrodes the soul and makes a man forget the promises of his youth. Sender forgot me. He forgot his sacred oath. He saw his daughter not as the fulfillment of a promise, but as a commodity, an asset to be traded for an even greater fortune, a more prestigious family name." The men in the room exchanged uneasy glances. Sender, standing in the corner, was ashen-faced, his body trembling. The ghost's words were striking him like physical blows. "And what of my son?" the Dybbuk cried out, the voice cracking with a father's pain. "Hanan grew up in poverty, but with a soul that burned with a holy fire. He was a scholar, a prodigy of the hidden Torah. His mind could untangle the most complex secrets of the Kabbalah. He wandered from town to town, studying, praying, His only possessions the clothes on his back and the books in his satchel. And by a twist of fate, or perhaps by the guiding hand of a destiny that Sender sought to deny, his travels brought him here, to this town. The voice softened, taking on a tone of tragic wonder. He saw her. He saw Leah. And he did not know who she was. He did not know of the pact that bound their souls before they were even born. And she saw him, a poor, intense student, his eyes filled with a wisdom beyond his years. And they fell in love, a pure, desperate love that blossomed in secret glances across the synagogue, in whispered words in the marketplace. It was the love that was meant to be, the love that was sworn into existence by their fathers. Hanan, my brilliant son, went to Sender. He presented himself not as the son of his forgotten friend, but as a humble scholar asking for his daughter's hand. And Sender, he laughed. He laughed at my boy. He saw only Hanan's poverty, his threadbare coat. He saw a nobody. He cast him out, telling him his daughter was promised to a rich man's son. He shattered my son's heart. He spat on the memory of our friendship. He broke the oath sworn before heaven. The air in the room grew colder still. This was not the random, chaotic evil they had prepared for. This was a story of a profound injustice. My son was consumed by despair, the Dybbuk continued, the voice now a low, dangerous whisper. The world had failed him. The laws of man had failed him. So he turned to other laws. He turned to the knowledge he possessed, the forbidden secrets of practical Kabbalah. He sought to bend the will of the cosmos, to summon forces that might compel Sender to honor his word, to win the heart of the woman who was already his by celestial right. He fasted for days. He performed ablutions and incantations. He drew holy names in the air, attempting to command angels, to shift the currents of fate. But this is a dangerous path. The power he sought to wield is not meant for the hands of mortals, especially not those whose hearts are clouded by desperation and grief. In his final frantic attempt, he reached too far. He invoked a name, a power so immense, so overwhelming. It extinguished his life like a candle in a storm. His soul was torn from his body. The voice of Nisan wept through Leah's unwilling mouth. And where could he go? His life was cut short. His destiny was unfulfilled. His bride was denied him. He had meddled with powers that stained his spirit, preventing him from finding peace in the world to come. His soul became untethered, a wanderer between worlds, a Dybbuk. He came to me, in the realm of shadows where I waited, my son, a tormented spirit, and he told me of Sender's betrayal, of his love for Leah, of his tragic end. A father's rage is a fearsome thing, Rabbi. Even in death, the oath was not just between Sender and me, it was between my son and his daughter. Hanan's soul clung to his destined bride, unable to move on. He could not enter her, for his own spirit was too conflicted, too damaged by the forbidden arts. So I came in his place. I, his father, Nisan ben Rivka. I came to claim what is rightfully his. I have crossed the barrier between worlds to see justice done. You ask by what right I am here? I am here by the right of a sacred oath. I am here by the right of a father's love. I am not possessing this girl to harm her. I am holding her in trust for my son, her promised husband. She is not your Leah, daughter of Sender. She is my daughter-in-law, the bride of Hanan. I will not leave her. I will not surrender her to another. Not until the promise is honored. The words hang in the air, thick and heavy as smoke from a snuffed candle. A dead man's claim, spoken with a living woman's voice. In the stunned silence, every eye turns to the old rabbi. This is no longer a simple matter of a wandering, malicious spirit. This is something else entirely. An accusation. A lawsuit brought from beyond the grave. Rabbi Osriel's gaze does not waver. He looks upon the possessed girl, but he speaks to the soul trapped within her, the soul of Hanan. His voice is not one of command, but of solemn inquiry, the voice of a judge weighing a case of cosmic importance. You have made a claim, the rabbi says, his words cutting through the tension. A claim of a sacred vow, a shvu made between two friends. Such a vow is not a trivial thing. It is a thread woven into the fabric of heaven itself. It cannot be lightly dismissed, but neither can it be accepted on your word alone. The living have a right to answer the claims of the dead. He turns to his attendant, Meyer. Go to the house of Sender, son of Henya. Tell him he has been summoned before this rabbinical court, this beit din. Tell him that a plaintiff has brought a charge against him, and he must come at once to answer it. The command sends a fresh wave of shock through the onlookers. A trial? A trial with a ghost? This is unheard of. But no one dares question the wisdom of the tzaddik of Miropol. Meyer scurries out of the synagogue, leaving the congregation in a state of suspended dread. They wait. They watch Leah, who sits eerily still, her eyes burning with an ancient fire, the soul of Hanan waiting patiently for his day in court. Time stretches. The only sounds are the shuffling of feet, the nervous coughs, the whispered prayers of the terrified. Then the heavy doors creak open. Sender enters, his face a mask of confusion and fear. He sees his daughter, and his face crumples, but then he sees the stern, unreadable expressions of the rabbi and the elders seated as judges. Sender, son of Henya, Rabbi Azriel begins, his voice echoing in the hushed synagogue. You have been summoned to answer a charge. A grave charge has been laid against you, not by a man of flesh and blood, but by a soul from the world of truth. The spirit that has entered your daughter claims to be Hanan, son of Nisan, and he claims you are bound to him by a holy vow, a promise that your daughter Leah would be his bride. Sender's face goes white. He stammers, Nisan, my friend Nisan, he died so many years ago. It was talk between two young men, foolish dreams. Was it a dream? A new voice cuts him off, Leah's voice but not her own. It is Hanan's voice, filled with the bitterness of a long-held grievance. Was it a dream, Sender, when we stood side by side, our hearts full of hope for the future? We were poor then, students of the holy books, but we had everything. We had our friendship, and we made a pact. We swore that if one of us were to have a son, and the other a daughter, those two children would be joined in marriage. We clasped hands on it. We called upon heaven and earth to be our witnesses. Was that a dream? Sender flinches as if struck. He looks away from his daughter's accusing eyes. We were young. Nisan passed away. I heard his son had also died. You heard what you wanted to hear. The Dybbuk roars through Leah's throat. You never sought me out. You never inquired after the son of your sworn friend. When my father died, I was left alone, a penniless orphan. I wandered from town to town, studying, praying, always clinging to the story of our father's promise. I learned the hidden wisdom, I fasted, I performed ablutions, I delved into the secret names of God, all to make myself worthy of your daughter. I came to this very town a stranger just to see her. And what did I find? The voice breaks with an agony that feels impossibly real. I found you, Sender, grown rich and proud. You had forgotten the poor scholar Nisan and his vow. You were arranging a marriage for Leah not with the son of your friend, but with the son of a wealthy man. You were selling her for money and status. I saw it with my own eyes. My heart, which had beaten only for her, shattered into 1,000 pieces. My soul could not bear the weight of your betrayal, and so it fled my body. It fled, and it sought the only justice it knew. It sought its rightful place beside its promised bride. Silence. Every word hangs in the air. An indictment of a promise broken, a life destroyed. All eyes are now on Sender. He is trembling, his face slick with sweat. He cannot meet the gaze of the rabbi, nor the burning eyes of his possessed daughter. Is this true, Sender? Rabbi Azriel asks, his voice soft but relentless. Did you make such a vow with Nisan, son of Mordecai? Sender's shoulders slump in defeat. He can barely speak, his voice a choked whisper. Yes, we made such a promise. But it was so long ago. He was poor. I became wealthy. Life changed. I wanted a good match for my daughter. A comfortable life. I thought Hanan was dead. It was easier to think he was dead. The admission is a confession. A collective gasp ripples through the onlookers. He broke a sacred vow. He had profited while the son of his friend suffered, and he had sought to marry his daughter to another, violating the oath sworn before God. Rabbi Azriel closes his eyes for a long moment, swaying slightly in prayer and contemplation. The other judges murmur amongst themselves, their faces grim. Finally, the old rabbi opens his eyes. The verdict is ready. Sender, son of Henya, he declares, his voice resonating with authority. This court finds that you have broken a sacred vow made with a departed soul. You have wronged both the dead and the living. You allowed worldly concerns to overshadow a holy promise. This is a grave sin. He continues, the vow cannot be fulfilled now. Hanan is no longer among the living, and a marriage cannot join the two worlds. But justice must be served. Atonement must be made. The sentence is pronounced. You, sender, will give half of your entire fortune to the poor of this community. Distribute it so that the needy may have food and the orphans may have shelter. And for the rest of your days, every year on the anniversary of his death, you will say Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, for the soul of Hanan, son of Nisan, and for his father Nisan, son of Mordecai. You will honor them as you should have honored them in life. Sender collapses to his knees, weeping. I will do it. I accept the judgment. He has been judged, his sin laid bare before his entire community. Justice in its own way has been done. A sense of resolution settles over the synagogue. The legal matter is closed. Rabbi Azriel now turns his full attention back to Leah. The fire in her eyes has not dimmed. The spirit of Hanan is still there. The rabbi's voice is gentle now but firm. He is no longer a judge but an exorcist. Hanan, son of Nisan, he says, addressing the Dybbuk directly. You have heard the verdict. Your grievance has been aired in a court of Torah. Your claim has been acknowledged. The man who wronged you has been judged and will make amends. Justice has been rendered. Your purpose here is finished. Now you must leave. The room holds its breath. Leah's head slowly lifts. A strange, sorrowful smile plays on her lips, a smile that is not her own. And through her, the Dybbuk gives its reply. Justice? You have judged the living. You have given my share of worldly goods to the poor. But what of me? What of my life that was stolen? What of my world that was destroyed? You have settled the debts of men, but you have not settled the accounts of my soul. A silence fell over the chamber, heavier than any stone, more profound than any prayer. The words, spoken in Leah's voice but with a resonance that was ancient and malevolent, hung in the air, a verdict delivered against the judges themselves. The elders of Meropol, men of law and faith, looked at one another. They had followed the holy texts, they had dispensed charity, they had pronounced Sender's guilt. They had done everything right according to the laws of man and God. And yet, here was a soul from beyond the veil, a soul they had wronged, accusing them of a justice so incomplete it was a mockery. Rabbi Azriel's gaze did not waver. He looked at the convulsing form of Leah, but he spoke directly to the spirit raging within her. His voice was no longer that of a commander, but of a judge addressing a plaintiff. You speak of accounts unsettled, he said, his tone measured, calm. Tell this court then, what is the justice you seek? What can the living do to balance the scales for the dead? We cannot return your years. We cannot restore your breath. Speak, Chanan, son of Nisan. What is your claim? The voice that answered was a torrent of grief and fury. My claim? My claim is the life I was promised. My claim is the woman who was sworn to me in the heavens before either of us was born. You speak of what you cannot do. Let me speak of what he did. The head of Leah snapped towards Sender, who shrank back, his face a mask of terror. He, Sender, son of Henya, saw my devotion. He saw my study, my fasting, my communion with the hidden worlds. He feared the power I was attaining. He feared the holy bond one was forging with his daughter, a bond he wished to sell to the highest bidder. And so, he broke his sacred oath. He stole my future, and in doing so, he murdered my soul long before my body gave out. The spirit's voice softened, becoming a whisper of pure anguish that was somehow more chilling than its rage. I died alone, my heart broken, my spirit unmoored. I wandered in the void, a shadow among shadows, unable to ascend, unable to rest. I saw the worlds turn. I saw Leah, my destined one, given to another. And I could do nothing. I was a breath of wind, a forgotten name, until I found a way back. A broken door. A crack in the wall of the worlds. I found her, my only home, my only harbor. And you want to cast me out? Into what? Into that same endless, silent darkness? No. My justice is here. Leah's hands came up to clutch her own throat, but the gesture was possessive, protective. My world is here. My bride is here. This is my claim. The rabbinical court was in turmoil. This was no simple demon, no mindless entity drawn to sin. This was a human soul, twisted by a profound injustice. To simply exorcise it now felt less like a purification and more like a second murder. They had judged Sender for his broken promise, his theft of money. But how could they judge him for the theft of a soul's destiny? What law covered such a crime? Rabbi Azriel held up a hand, silencing the murmurs of the other rabbis. He understood the precipice on which they stood. This was a test not of power but of wisdom, not of ritual but of compassion. "Channon," he began again, his voice resonating with a deep, sorrowful authority. "You speak the truth. A great wrong was done to you. A sacred oath was violated, and your path in this life was cut short. This court acknowledges your pain. We acknowledge your grievance." He paused, letting the words settle. This was a critical moment. He was no longer an adversary but an arbiter. "But you, in your own grief, are now committing a great wrong. This body is not yours. It is the vessel for the soul of Leah, daughter of Sender. She is an innocent. In clinging to her, you are destroying her. You are spilling innocent blood to avenge your own. You are perpetuating the very cycle of injustice that destroyed you. Is this the legacy you wish to leave? To become the monster that your own suffering created?" A low guttural sob escaped Leah's lips, a sound of two souls weeping at once. "What else is there?" the Dybbuk cried. "Without her I am nothing." A forgotten name whispered on the wind. "To leave her is to die a second time, a true and final death." "No," Rabbi Azriel said, his voice firm, unwavering. "It is not. You have forgotten the ways of the worlds, lost in your own darkness. A soul is never nothing. A name once given is never truly forgotten. We cannot give you back your life with Leah. That was stolen, and the past cannot be unwritten. But we can restore what was taken after. We can restore your name. We can restore your memory." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into the tormented form before him. "Here is the judgment of this court, a judgment not only for the living but for the dead. We will right the wrong that was done to you. First, a portion of Sender's wealth, the very wealth he chose over you, will be set aside to establish a charity in your name. Food for the hungry, shelter for the poor, all given in the memory of Channon, son of Nisan. Your name will be a blessing, not a curse." The tremors in Leah's body seemed to lessen slightly. The spirit was listening. "Second," the rabbi continued, his voice rising with power, "we will commission the scribing of a new Torah scroll, the holiest of all acts, and it will be dedicated in your honor. For every year of study you lost, 1,000 letters will be written. Your devotion to the sacred texts will be immortalized in a sacred text of its own." He stood up, his presence filling the room. "And third, and most important, 10 men from this community, including myself, will pledge to say the Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, for your soul. Not just for the traditional 11 months but every single day for all the days of our lives. And we will teach our sons to do the same. Your soul will be prayed for, elevated and remembered generation after generation. You will never be a forgotten name again. You will be bound to this community not by possession but by prayer, not by terror but by memory." He lowered his voice, the power replaced by a gentle, pleading tone. "Channon, your anger is just, but it has led you to a path of darkness. We offer you a different path. A path to peace, path to elevation, a path back to the light. We cannot give you the marriage you deserved in this world, but we can give you a legacy that will echo in all the worlds to come. We ask you, we beg you, release this innocent woman. Let go of your hatred, and accept the justice and the peace that we now offer your soul." The room was utterly still. Every eye was fixed on Leah. Her body, which had been racked with violent spasms, was now rigid, frozen. Her head was cocked to one side, as if listening to a debate being waged in a realm no one else could perceive. The spirit of Channon was considering the offer. The rage that had fueled it, the grief that had anchored it to the world, was now being weighed against the promise of peace, the promise of memory. Could a wound that deep ever truly be healed? Could a soul so lost find its way home? The fate of Leah, the soul of Channon, and the very moral fabric of Meropol hung in the balance of that terrible, silent deliberation. The rabbi had made his offer. The court had rendered its supernatural judgment. Now the Dybbuk had to make its choice, to cling to its earthly vengeance, or to finally let go. The air in the synagogue became a solid thing, a weight pressing down on every soul present. Every flicker of the black candles seemed to take an eternity. Every breath was held, a silent prayer suspended in the charged atmosphere. Through Leah's lips a sound began to form. Not a human sound, but the grinding of gravestones, the whisper of dry leaves skittering across a forgotten path. It was the voice of Channon, the voice of the Dybbuk, speaking for the last time from the world of the living. "You offer me peace," the voice rasped, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. "What peace is there for a soul torn from its destiny?" The voice spat, and every eye turned to the trembling form of Sender. He swore an oath before heaven. Our souls were bound. He broke that sacred vow for gold, for a name. He sealed my fate in the dust, and for that, he would know my torment. This girl, she was my promised one. Her body is the only home I have left. Her breath, the only air I can breathe. The voice softened, a chilling transformation from rage to a sorrow so profound it seemed to bend the very light in the room. But the holy court has spoken. The righteous dead have turned their faces from me. To remain here is to be unmade, to be ground into nothingness by the wheels of divine law. My vengeance is a fire, but even fire is consumed by the endless dark. A single crystalline tear traced a path down Leah's cheek. It was her tear, but his sorrow. "I will leave," the Dybbuk whispered, and a collective gasp, a release of unbearable tension, swept through the synagogue. "I accept the judgment. I will go. But first, the oath must be undone." The rabbi of Meropol nodded, his face grim but resolute. This was the final critical step. He turned to the quivering Sender. "Sender, son of David, you must now formally release the soul of Channon, son of Nisan, from the vow you made with his father. You must annul the betrothal and ask his spirit for forgiveness." Sender stumbled forward, his wealth and arrogance stripped away, leaving only a terrified, broken old man. He fell to his knees before the possessed form of his daughter. His voice was a choked, pathetic thing. I release you, Channon, son of Nisan. I annul the vow. I was wrong, blinded by pride. Forgive me. In the name of God, forgive me." A terrible, shuddering sigh escaped Leah's lips. It was the sound of a chain, forged in heaven and broken on earth, finally rusting into dust. The Dybbuk had its justice, not of vengeance but of acknowledgement. The truth had been spoken aloud in a sacred space. "It is time," the rabbi declared, his voice ringing with authority. He motioned to his assistants. The minion of 10 righteous men closed the circle tighter, their prayers rising in a unified, powerful chant. "We adjure you, Spirit, by the authority of the Holy Court and in the name of the Most High, depart from the body of this daughter of Israel, Leah, daughter of Batya. Go to your designated place. Do not tarry. Do not harm her as you leave. Depart now." The rabbi raised the shofar, the sacred ram's horn, to his lips. He took a deep breath and a single piercing blast tore through the silence. It wasn't a musical note, it was a primal cry, a sound that spoke of Sinai and Jericho, a sound designed to shatter the barriers between worlds. The effect was instantaneous and violent. A gale-force wind erupted from the center of the room, extinguishing every candle at once, plunging the synagogue into absolute darkness, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the high windows. Leah's body arched backward, a silent scream frozen on her face. The men of the minyan held their ground, their chanting growing louder, a wall of faith against the spiritual storm. Again the rabbi blew the shofar, the tikia, a long sustained blast that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. And again the shavarim, 3 broken, wailing notes, like the sound of a soul weeping. The room grew impossibly cold. Whispers seemed to come from every corner, the voices of the departed drawn to the threshold between realms. The rabbi's voice cut through the chaos. "In which part of the body will you exit?" he demanded of the spirit. This was no idle question. An exit through the eyes, the mouth, or the brain could leave the host blind, mute, or dead. The spirit had to be forced out through a path of least harm. A faint ethereal voice, no longer using Leah's vocal cords but seeming to echo in the minds of everyone present, gave its reply. Through the little toe of her right foot. It was a sign of submission. The spirit would obey. The rabbi raised the shofar one last time. He blew the teruah, a series of 9 staccato, frantic blasts, a sound of alarm and of victory. It was the final assault. As the last note faded, a single sharp crack like a dry twig snapping was heard. And then silence. a profound, deep, and holy silence. The wind was gone. The cold had receded. The oppressive weight in the air had lifted. In the center of the circle, Leah's body went limp, slumping to the floor like a marionette whose strings had been cut. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, someone relit a candle. The small flame pushed back the gloom, revealing the scene. Leah lay on the floor, pale and still but breathing. Her eyes fluttered open. They were her own eyes now, filled not with ancient rage, but with a deep human exhaustion. She was free. The story of the Dybbuk of Mariupol did not end there. It became a legend whispered in yeshivas and around Sabbath tables for generations. Sender, true to his word, gave away half his fortune to the poor and spent the rest of his days in prayer and repentance, a living ghost haunted by his own greed. The wealthy suitor, upon hearing of the exorcism, wanted no part of a bride who had been a vessel for the dead, and the engagement was broken. And Leah? She recovered slowly, the memory of her possession a shadow she would carry forever. She never married. In a way, she had already fulfilled her vow to her bashert, her intended one. Their souls had been joined in the most terrifying and intimate way imaginable, a union of love, grief, and divine justice that no earthly ceremony could ever match. This story, immortalized in Ansky's play, is the ultimate expression of the Dybbuk legend. But it's more than just a ghost story. It's a profound spiritual drama about the nature of a universe bound by moral law. It tells us that oaths are not empty words, that love can be stronger than the grave, and that justice, even when denied by man, will find a way to manifest. The Dybbuk is not merely a monster, it is a consequence. It is the personification of a cosmic imbalance, a soul denied its rightful place, clinging to the living world to demand that a wrong be made right. In our modern secular world, the idea of a literal spirit invading a body might seem like a relic of a superstitious past. But the language of possession is still deeply embedded in our psychology. We speak of being possessed by an idea, haunted by a memory, or gripped by an emotion. We talk about wrestling with our inner demons. We understand what it means to feel like a passenger in our own lives, driven by forces of trauma, obsession, or grief that feel separate from our true selves. The Dybbuk is the ultimate metaphor for the unexorcised parts of our own history, both personal and collective. It is the ghost of the past, demanding a reckoning in the present. It represents the voices that have been silenced, the promises that have been broken, the injustices that have been buried but not forgotten. And so the Dybbuk endures. It endures not just as a fascinating creature from Jewish folklore, but as a powerful symbol of the human condition. It reminds us that our world is interwoven with the unseen, that our actions ripple out into eternity, and that every soul, living or dead, yearns for one thing above all else: to be heard, to be acknowledged, and to finally find its way home.